My husband is incredible, and he's come a long way. And I think you start to realize how nuanced he had been in his faith all along, and how much, I was so worried that he lived in the same black and white world that I did, that he was worried about this, empty chairs version of heaven, that, Kalin's breaking her covenants and we're not going to be together as a family. And I asked him one day, are you worried about me being with you? And he said, not even a little bit. I don't believe in that kind of heaven. I don't believe in that kind of God. But I'm like, but Nelson says, if you don't keep your covenants, you will not be reunited. And he's like, that's Nelson's opinion. Mm-hmm. And that was like shocking to me, because I, in my, believing days, could not have ever differentiated between, when a prophet was speaking for God and when it was his own opinion. So I respect Aaron's belief. I love him for his belief. I don't want or expect him to change his belief. But I don't think I could move forward in a marriage with somebody who thought I was going to hell. So there is some flexibility. Or
who saw you as a disappointment, right?
Yeah. And I still struggled with that for a long time. But, because even though he doesn't think I'm going to hell, is he disappointed with who I am? But I think Aaron's perspective on my faith journey has changed, and we're both kind of feeling, again, with the perspective of choosing to believe that there's a God. The only way I can reconcile the fact that I felt so abandoned for over a year of praying and pleading is that God wanted me to be where I am right now. I had never thought that maybe God wasn't answering my prayers because he didn't want me in the church or didn't want me with an orthodox belief. Like, that never was a possibility in my mind.
But as you've seen the fruits of that movement.
Yeah, I feel like now I can say I believe, or I hope that, God led me to where I am, and that there's a reason he needs me here. Mm-hmm. He, she, it, they. Mm-hmm. I don't know. And Aaron sees that too. And Aaron, I think he really believes that. I think he believes that I and he are better for having gone through my faith crisis and my faith transition, and that our hearts are bigger and more open and kinder. And I remember Wayne's sermon. Do you mind if I read
Please.
This paragraph? At the Thrive Day 2019, at the end of his talk, he says this. He says, I testify that the goodness is in you. It has always been in you. And it never was, and it never has been in your church. It's the biggest trick and the biggest con religion ever played, that without Big Brother, our eternal watcher, we would never know how to treat each other. This is absolute nonsense. We are led to believe that religion has a monopoly on morals, that without it, we are lost. It tricks us into believing that we have lost something that they never gave us in the first place, something that was never theirs to give. Your goodness is yours, and it always has been yours. Don't go one more day thinking your morality left you when you walked out of the doors of your church, your synagogue, or your mosque. You brought the goodness to your communities. You brought your goodness into the pews of your church. You bring it here with you today, and you take that goodness with you when you leave. All the fears that I had about losing my sense of morality or my moral code, or just going off the deep end, and I don't say this to make myself like I'm better than my believing members, but I am a better person for me.
You're alive.
I'm alive, and I'm wanting to do good. Those desires didn't leave me when, even though I still don't know if there's a God, like, it has nothing to do with God anymore. It's about me wanting to relieve the suffering of others. And that desire is stronger than it's ever been in my entire life. And I don't feel burdened down by the feelings of guilt. And like, I felt like I've always been a good person, but I felt like I couldn't be good because I was always feeling guilty for the things I wasn't doing. Always felt guilty because I wasn't fasting long enough, or I wasn't consistent enough with my prayers and scripture study, or I wasn't doing enough missionary work, or I hadn't been doing ancestry work like my temple or my patriarchal blessing says I'm supposed to do, family history work. I'm not going to the temple every week. It's like it weighs you down so much that it's just like, why do anything at all then? And you totally miss the important stuff, which is to help other people living breathing humans. And I feel like I can do that now. I feel like I'm not boggled down by all the other things. And I remember talking with my dad one night and him just telling me, like, Kalin, like, I'm really surprised. Like, I feel like if I were to ever leave the church, like, I wouldn't be a good person. I wouldn't be, have the desires that I have. And I think the church does, work really well for my dad and he's a wonderful man. But I don't believe that leaves you when you lose religion. And unfortunately, we kind of blame people for their lives going really poorly after leaving the church. We say, oh, well, that's clearly the fruits of that decision. But Mormonism does not prepare people to, again, turn inward for that moral code. It's all about external. And so when you take away the external, you take away a belief in God, you take away a belief in prophets, you're left with nothing. And so, Aaron and I have talked about this, how if nothing else, like if our daughters are Mormon or not, great, like it doesn't matter, but we want that authority and that morality to come from within so that no matter what their beliefs are, no matter how that changes and evolves throughout their life, they're able to do good and be good. And no one gets to tell them that they're not worthy. Nobody gets to tell me I'm not worthy ever again.
Are you worried at all? The church has now renamed disciplinary councils to membership councils, and they've renamed excommunication to removal or suspension of membership or something like that. Are you worried that even doing this interview and being honest about your feelings about the church's truth claims could lead to the equivalent of a disciplinary council and potentially the equivalent of excommunication? Or not worried?
I feel like there have already been sacrificial lambs that have paved the way for people like me to be able to do this more safely. And, my heart breaks that people like Leah and Cody Young had to go through that to provide a place, to bring to light how harmful and unfair and not right that was. But I feel like I would be very surprised if that happened. If that did, though, I don't care. That would be sad to me because I feel like I'm in a place right now where I'm able to have a place in my ward, and I feel like I'm able to have great conversations with people. So I would be really sad losing my membership and having people feel like I'm an unsafe person. But other than that, it doesn't really matter to me at all. And there's been times I wanted to resign, and I may still do that one day. But right now, I don't feel like it's necessary. But again, I don't see that with the new changes. I feel pretty confident that that's not going to happen. But if it did, I'm perfectly comfortable with that outcome.
Okay.
I think I would resign before doing a disciplinary council. I don't think I'm
for submitting to it.
Yeah, I don't.
Sitting in front of 15 men or 3 men or whatever and have them judge your worthiness.
Yeah,
again.
Part of me would want to do it just so that, again, more light can be brought to these unfair, ridiculous situations. But I don't think, again, with how I feel now, I don't think I'll ever let anyone decide my worthiness before God.
Yeah. So at least two kind of things we need to touch on. Lots of people are in mixed faith marriages, and it's really hard. I have people close to me in mixed faith marriages. What time do you need to go? Are you okay?
No, I'm
time?
totally
okay.
good. I'm not.
We need to have lunch.
You're good.
Do you have any tips on how to not handle a mixed faith marriage and how to handle a mixed faith marriage so that people can navigate their own relationships?
I think there's a lot of resources out there that do a really good job. Marriage on a Tightrope, different Facebook groups. For me, like I said, going slow and really trying to put yourself in your spouse's shoes. Like, go back to your most orthodox, black and white, believing TBM days and try to picture what it would have felt like if your spouse was having doubts about the church. I think starting in a place of compassion and empathy goes a long way. But moving slowly and being open and honest about where you're at and compromising. I think it's hard when and I've struggled with this, like with both having been, the marriage contract when we got married was like temple marriage, raising our kids in the church. And so when I lose my faith, Aaron feels like he's compromising on everything. Like, oh, like Kalin wants to go to a different church once a month. Like I'm having to give up all this stuff that wasn't in the original contract. Whereas I'm feeling like I don't believe it all anymore. And I'm saying I'll go 3 times a month to your church. So, really the one who's compromising is me. And he doesn't see that way because the original contract was, that we go every week. So it feels like he's the one having to give something up. So again, it's difficult dynamics because I didn't choose my faith crisis. I didn't choose to lose my faith. And yet it happened to me. And, but
also the covenants you made, you didn't have all the information at the time you made them.
Right.
And that's something that's just kind of tricky because the church has this notion of a covenant breaker. And yet, if we'd known all the stuff we learned, maybe we wouldn't have made those covenants. And plus, oftentimes those covenants are made under slightly coercive circumstances. You don't know beforehand when you go in what you're promising.
Well,
and all your family's around, and are you really going to get up and leave when they give you the option to get up and leave? And they give you that option to leave before they do all the weird stuff. And so I mean, like,
you don't get an option at the end to be like, does anyone want to take this back?
Yeah,
like you get one
at
chance.
The end, it's only the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember like I was still going through my like first faith crisis when I went through the temple for the first time. And I remember feeling like, when they say that part of, is there anyone that, I wanted so badly to raise my hand, but again, you're not going to do that because your whole family's there and everyone's excited for you. And, you're curious of what this thing is you've been waiting, anticipating your whole life. But yeah, I mean, I do feel like it's not fair to hold me to a contract I made under the, beliefs that the church is exactly what it says it was, And when I don't believe that it is anymore, I feel like that changes the contract. But again,
you're still married.
Yeah, putting yourself in your spouse's shoes, like to them, that doesn't feel fair. And it's painful. And there's, feelings of betrayal, which again, were so hard for me. The fact that he felt betrayed was betraying to me. Like, how dare you feel betrayed? Like, I didn't choose this. I'm not betraying you. Like, the church is betraying you, not me.
You felt betrayed.
Yeah, I felt betrayed. And so, again, just holding space for your spouse's feelings, this is really, really hard for them too. And sometimes there's going to be conflicting feelings. Aaron always tells me this. Like, I feel like your feelings can't be happening at the same time as my feelings because they're contradictory. And so I don't know, it's hard navigating that space, but compromising and patience. Like I never thought that Aaron and I would get to where we are. Like 1 year ago today, I never would have thought. I mean, just this Sunday, Aaron went with me we went and tried out the Unitarian Universalist Church. And he went with me and sat with me the whole time and even said to me, if we need to go to a different church for a few months, like we can do that. Because I was really, really struggling this last week with the whole BYU
Honor
fiasco.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I never would have thought that would be possible. And I know not every marriage is going to get there. I know not every spouse is as nuanced as Aaron is. But I just feel like if you can get your spouse to look at it logically, like God's not going to separate us. That's just fear rhetoric. And it's if you truly believe in a loving God, like even if Mormonism is true and I'm wrong, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense that God's going to punish you, even if you're being deceived by Satan. Like, that's not fair, So I don't know. I feel like for me, I wouldn't have been able to make the marriage work if Aaron bought into that doctrine that if I don't keep my covenants, I'm not going to be with him.
So Aaron believes you'll be together.
Absolutely.
Even though the church teaches something different.
Yeah, even if I resigned.
Love it. How have you, so somebody asked earlier, once you learn about Fanny Alger and Kinderhook plates and Stone in the Hat and, Book of Abraham, all that stuff, Masons in the temple, you want to you want your husband to listen to Mormon Stories or read CES Letter, and not only do you want to expose them to all the information, you feel like that is that will lead to them losing their faith, because in your mind, any rational thinking, honest, intelligent person is going to come to the same conclusions that I did. So how have you managed your desire for him to learn all the stuff you've learned? And then how have you managed to not disrespect him for not caring as much about the evidence and then not seeing the evidence in the same way that you do?
Yeah, it's a hard place to be in.
Why are you smiling?
Because I remember feeling in the beginning, like, you just feel so misunderstood. You feel, again, so misjudged. And it's not that you want other people to lose their faith. It's that you want to be validated in your conclusions. You don't want to feel like you're crazy for having this bother you. You don't want to feel like you're weak or unfaithful because you can't accept that God would command Joseph to, do some of the things that he did. You want to be validated, especially by the people you love more than anyone, by my parents and by Aaron. I was okay with other people judging me. I could handle the bishop's misjudgments. I could handle ward members, but I couldn't handle Aaron misunderstanding. And I needed him to understand why a rational, good person can come to the conclusion that it's not true. And again, it's not about him losing his faith, because I don't want that to happen, to be honest. I mean, I think there would be part of it, there's this
part of you has to want that, just so you'll be on the same page, right?
The easiness of it, that it might be easier to be on the same page. But at the same time, like, I still love a lot of parts of Mormonism, and I'm still kind of grateful a little bit that his belief forces me to hold on to those good parts, because I feel like I have healthy relationships with my parents and believing members, having to navigate that space, rather than, because if it had just been me, if I was not married, I would have closed the book and been done in the beginning and never looked back. And I would have probably stayed angry. And I feel like it's forced me to come to a better place with it all. Whereas I think it could have been really easy to just stay angry and never work through it. Whereas I feel like now I'm kind of forced to struggle and, but I think one time in our marriage, I wrote him an email and said, hey, like, I'm making you a proposal, just like missionaries. Like, I invite you to study and find out for yourself, like that kind of thing. Commitment pattern. Yeah.
Prepare, invite, follow up.
And I was like, I will never ask you again. Like, this is my one and only offer. Like, I'll always wonder, what would have been like if you had, if you had come to the same conclusions as I did. And he didn't take me up on it. But Aaron has, over little by little, it's not like we sat down one time and read the CS letter together, but we have discussed at length specific issues. And again, I think Aaron's gone through a little bit of a faith transition himself. I can't speak for him, but his faith is evolving, and I don't know if even he knows exactly where he's at with everything. But he's become more understanding, at least that he, I finally got him to listen to Bryce Cook's article about LGBTQ. With me.
Where can you listen to that?
So he just like recorded himself reading it.
Okay.
So at the very top, there's a link to him listening to it. And I had him listen to it because we were going to go meet with my mission president regarding LGBTQ issues. And finally got him to listen to it. And I think at the end, he just said, if anything, like, it makes you just understand why people really struggle with this issue. And it makes you really understand why people have a hard time believing what the prophets say today and not question them when there's a clear pattern of reversals, disavowments, like very clear doctrinal changes over time. I think he gets that now and is able to empathize with how I came to the conclusion, even though maybe he doesn't agree with it, and he still holds on to the spiritual experiences he had, and his brain doesn't work the same as mine and doesn't have the same issues intellectually that I do. he can understand why. And that was necessary for me. Like, I needed him to at least validate, hey, I can see why you came to this conclusion. I might not agree with you, but I can see why. And I think that's all any ex-Mormon or post-Mormon or non-believing Mormon wants, is for their believing. It's so hard when the church puts so much fear around these issues, they won't even look at them. And then you're left feeling like they have no idea what's out there, and they're still going to judge me for being unfaithful or deceived. You know, there's nothing more upsetting than having a believing family member that will refuse to look at the issues while still maintaining that you are absolutely wrong. And luckily, you know, my parents and my husband haven't done that, and I'm grateful for that.
So Aaron was able to read enough to be able to say to you, hey, I get it. I get why you've lost your faith.
And his personal belief, you know, as far as what he's told me, is that he feels like God has led me to where I am and feels like I'm and he are better because of it. And so that's great. I feel very, very lucky to have that, but I never would have thought a year ago.
That's rare.
So I don't know. I don't know if you always feel that. But I mean, I know there's mixed faith marriages that don't get to that place, and that's a harder space to navigate. But I would just say have patience. It's so hard.
And how do you not judge him as being like an ostrich with the head in the sand, or not courageous, or true non-truth loving, all the negative things that a non-believing, you know, Mormon can feel about a believer? Like, you losing respect for him for maintaining his beliefs. How have you avoided that? And maybe you've already answered it, but is there anything else you want to say about that?
I mean, I think having gone through like a mini faith crisis before my mission, and then having been able to get by on apologetics, like, I don't judge that girl as being an idiot or stupid.
Your former self. Yeah,
my former self, like missionary Kalin, even though I was aware of some of the issues like Book of Abraham translation, you know, and I was able to nuance that. And so I also have read enough apologetics where I see where they're coming from. I see how they nuance these things. I see how they find faithful interpretations and reconciliations. And I desperately wanted those to work for me, but I finally just had to accept that they didn't. And they just caused me so much mental anguish that if I wanted to be alive and healthy, I needed to let go, and I needed to stop fighting to make those work for me. But I can respect that maybe for Aaron's brain, or how his, you know, the way he draws lines between things, like, I'm fine with him not having the same problem with it that I did. And sometimes I'm jealous, you know, life would be simpler if I could have reconciled things in the way. Or, you know, like my older sister, and I just have to give a shout out to her and her husband too. They played a huge role in my journey, in the sense that I felt like they were the only people saying to me all along, you got this, you do you. Whatever you know, wherever you land, like, we trust you. And I felt like they were the only people telling me that, whereas everyone else, you know, whether directly or indirectly, it felt like, you know, trying to help me to reach the conclusion they wanted me to. And I felt like her and her husband were just like, hey, like, it's okay. Take a break from church. Don't stress. Like, you know, you don't have to figure this out tomorrow. You know, my sister is kind of in a place where I texted her one day right after I read the CS letter. And I said, if you knew, I said, like, you know, not just like, if you knew without a doubt, like God himself told you, like, the church is not true, like, would you leave the church? And she said, honestly, no. She's at a place where it's all about utility. And we've talked about this at the retreat too. There's utility Mormons, and there's validity.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Melaine wants and hopes a lot of certain parts of Mormonism is true. You know, but I don't think she has perfect knowledge, and she's comfortable living in that space. And I know a lot of Mormons from, you know, some of the online groups I'm in that live in that ambiguity and are comfortable there. And, you know, not comfortable, I guess that's not a good word, but can live there and be okay with it. And I totally respect that path. And I think it's totally valid way to live your life. If, you know, the gospel helps you and makes you happy, like, do it. Great.
Yeah, I agree.
So
if it makes you happy and healthy, live it, follow it, love it. I celebrate you. Absolutely. And there are a lot of people like your dad, like your mom, that, you know, We learned this from Jonathan Haidt and the Righteous Mind. It's a book, and basically he makes the argument that we ultimately don't arrive at our core life choices logically. We feel what's most right to us, and then we use logic and reason and evidence afterwards to support the conclusions we arrive at emotionally. So it's really not about, for many people, maybe most, it's just not about the evidence. It's not about the facts. That's all just confirmation bias either way to justify. We're doing something because it makes us feel good overall. It makes us feel healthy and happy enough overall. And people leave the church to pursue happiness and health and joy. And people stay in the church to pursue happiness and health and joy. And at the end of the day, people are just tending to their own well-being.
Yeah, and it really does. In that sense, I can see how it comes down to a choice. Because having been on both sides, and I feel like I'm decently self-aware enough to know that I have confirmation bias now on this side. You know, I see evidence, or I'll read about a woman's experience with polygamy where she had either an angel or a really strong spiritual experience.
Said it was amazing.
Where God told her that this was the right thing. And I'm very quick to be very hesitant about that.
Yeah. Or a woman just says it was great. I loved it.
Right.
Who are we to tell her?
Yeah, I'm very skeptical of that perspective because, again, it causes cognitive dissonance. And so in the end, you can't live in that space, the confusion forever. I feel like you've got to come to a conclusion and just move forward. At least for me, I had to do that. You know, I can't live in that mental agony of weighing the back and forth and doing the mental gymnastics. Like, for me, the more logical and peaceful conclusion was that it's not true. And for someone else, it might be, and both sides are going to now pick and choose the facts that work well for that place we've landed.
Yeah. So the final thing I want to just explore before we wrap up, you've decided to stay active in the church and to keep attending as, I don't want to say non-believer, but as certainly not believing in the church's core truth claims. And
I'm comfortable with non-believer.
As a non-believer, you're staying active. You say you have a calling, but you're not wanting a temple recommend. So number one, how do you do that? There's so many people that go to church and it makes them nervous. It makes them crazy. It makes them angry. It makes them sick inside. And so they just can't stand to be there and listen to it. How do you do that? But then going a step further, how do you serve in a calling? How do you navigate raising your kids? Like so many people are like, it'll ruin my kids, you know. How do you make church attendance work for now?
I feel like I still experience all of those things that you're describing, the pain, the anger, the frustration.
Shoot.
I have to walk out sometimes. But I've developed a few tricks that have helped me. One of them is when I go to church, I pretend like I'm attending a Catholic mass, or I'm visiting a mosque or some other religion that I did not grow up in. And I would never go and sit in mass and feel angry if they were teaching things that I didn't believe or saying things that were historically inaccurate. I would just allow them to, and I might even admire their belief system without having to feel like it needed to be mine. And so having that perspective, going to church and just kind of observing it from like an outsider of, you know,
like an anthropologist. Yeah,
like this is really interesting and it's fine that they feel that way, but I don't have to feel that way.
Yeah.
I really struggle. Like I just realized I'll get like so triggered by some little phrase and I have this mantra I tell myself, just because someone says it doesn't make it true. And so someone will say something about people being deceived or about apostates or about doubt. And I'll start to feel like the redness in my chest and hot and, you know, I'll start to feel emotional. And I just start telling myself, just because someone says it doesn't mean it's true. And I don't know why that helps, but it does. It just reminds me that I'm not crazy and that, you know, just because there's cute little phrases people want to say and sometimes they don't think about the implications of what they're saying and how that's hurtful to me or my family or my mixed faith marriage. You know, just because they say it doesn't make it true.
Okay.
But it's hard to be in a place where everyone around you believes the same things, it's hard not to slip back into that place of feeling crazy. And so I think it's important, and I've explored this a lot, and I'm trying to find more communities. That's why Aaron and I went to the retreat, is to find more people that I can feel validated around, and I can feel, like they get me. And listening to Mormon stories, surrounding myself with groups like that, I've got to counterbalance it, because if I'm only ever around believing Mormons, I'll lose my mind. And it's funny because when we went to the Unitarian Universalist church, the entire sermon was on politics, and it was all about how are we going to get Trump out of office? And my husband's not necessarily a Trump supporter, but he's I think he considers himself a constitutionalist, and didn't really agree with a lot of the politics, and it was a little frustrating for him, and he felt a little alone in that setting. And so I said, I don't agree with some of the things being said either, but I hope this experience helped you to feel what I feel every Sunday, where everyone else is totally on the same page, not in their heads, and I'm just operating in a completely different worldview. And it's hard. It's hard to feel, like I can contribute in that environment or be valued for. And it's really this weird thing because, you study Fowler's stages of faith. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm in a better place than I was. I'm moving along on the stages of faith and improving my faith. And yet, because I don't believe the prophet speaks for God, I'm automatically, seen as struggling and lower on the chain of faith. And so being in an environment where you're not valued for what you feel like is your self-improvement and becoming a better person, but because you're struggling with truth claims, no matter what you do, you're seen as struggling with your testimony and your faith. And, people kind of reach out to you in that way of, let me help you. I used to feel the same way, and yada, 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 where I'm no, I feel good where I'm at. I feel like I'm in a better place. I don't feel like I want to go back to where I was. And so I feel like it's hard feeling misunderstood in that way. It was really hard in the beginning, not having a temple recommend. I knew that immediately coming out as a non-believer, I've limited my ability to make a difference in the church in meaningful ways. I'll never have, unless things dramatically change or I have a very nuanced bishop, I'm never going to be in a really steady presidency. I'm never going to serve probably in a teaching capacity.
I always thought it was kind of second-class citizen. If you don't have a temple recommend, if you can't, for men, if you can't participate in blessings, if you can't ordain your kid, can't baptize your kid, whatever it is, that was always a problem for me. I'm I'll stay, but I don't want to be a second-class citizen.
Yeah, that's exactly how you feel. Is that how you feel? And I didn't realize how much the approval of others and how much my church experience was about fitting in and feeling praised and feeling validated until I lost that. Mm-hmm. And then I realized how surfacey my church experience was to begin with. And
that is the big loss, is losing everyone's esteem and all the positive reinforcers. That's probably the big loss, right?
Huge.
Being seen as special and righteous and noble and valiant.
I loved that. That was a huge motivator for me to go out with the missionaries and to invite people to hear the missionary speak. It was all about, being seen as a good Mormon. And so no matter what I do now, I'm not going to be seen as a good Mormon anymore. Mm-hmm. And I've had to sit with that and come to terms with that. And that's been hard. Really, really hard, but feel like I'm getting to a place where I'm okay with that. I got up and bore my testimony.
What?
The beginning of this month, and it went something kind of I don't really know what I believe anymore. The bishop had spoken first, and I was the second one to come up. And Aaron's we just moved to a new ward, and so he's shocked, what is she gonna say? Why is she standing up right now? But the bishop had mentioned, some different ways to describe faith. And I got up and just said, the two definitions of faith that resonate with me are, one, to trust, and two, faith is to hope for things which are not seen. I said, by that definition, I have a lot of faith. I have a lot of hope for certain things. I said, I don't even know what I believe anymore. I don't know about the divinity of Christ, but respect the heck out of the guy. I said that.
Whoa.
So I respect the heck out of the guy, and I want to follow his teachings. I don't know about, the whole divinity thing. And I said, I hope there's something bigger out there, and I hope that something bigger takes the form of a loving father and mother. That was kind of my whole testimony. But doing things like that, it feels good to be authentic. And there's going to be people that appreciate that, and there's going to be people who are like, oh, that girl really needs some help. And then I'm honest in Sunday school. I'll raise my hand and I'll ask a question. I shared my brother's experience about being told that he should leave the church in Sunday school 2 weeks ago, and just said, because we were talking about Satan and deceiving us and how can we avoid the deceptions of Satan. And my question was, my brother has this experience. I think most members are going to say, well, he was deceived, but how is that fair? Is he going to be held accountable for being deceived when he truly feels like he's doing what God wants? Is Satan that much more powerful than the Holy Ghost? And so I'll ask questions like this, or, I'll bring up LGBT stuff, and I think it makes everyone in the room a little uncomfortable. Yep. And I'm sure there's people that wish I would just leave the church and move on. But I don't know. I feel like that's where I'm supposed to be right now with my husband, with my kids. I'm trying to carve out a little space for myself. And I know I'll have varying degrees of success depending on the ward and leadership. But, right now it's the whole social circle. We just moved to this University of Utah family student housing. So our entire apartment complex is in the same ward. And, to try to leave at that point, how do you make friends? How do you, so I'm trying to make it work. I really am. But I don't know. I don't know for how long. I could decide next week not to ever go back. So, but right now it's working. So,
one of our viewers, November is her name, wants to know what calling you have. If you want to share.
So I did have a calling before we just moved. So we just moved about a month ago. But I was the young women's sports director, which was the perfect calling for me because I love sports.
What's your sport?
Volleyball.
Okay, cool.
Is my main sport. But I played basketball in high school too. But so that was super fun.
At Lone Peak?
I played volleyball at Lone Peak. Yeah, I did.
That's a big deal.
Thanks.
I mean, right? They're top in the state, right?
Yeah, our team took state my junior year, but then I quit sports and started doing all the other stuff my senior year. So, I was the young women's sports director, which was seriously so perfect. I wish, because our ward now doesn't have a young women's, or else I would ask for that same calling. But I think I can serve in basically anything like compassionate service or, I like being a ministering sister. I like taking meals to people. Honestly, that's one of the biggest reasons I've decided to stay active in the church, because as good as my heart is, as good as my intentions are, I feel like unless you have a framework to be able to serve, it doesn't go very far.
Yeah,
And I started volunteering in Circle, and even though I felt
in Salt Lake, yeah.
Okay. And even though I felt meaning in doing that, it felt like I wasn't. It felt like I wasn't helping as much as I was hoping I would be. And the fact of the matter is all humans are suffering. Mormons are suffering. Everyone has hard things. Having a baby is so hard. So if I can be in a community that provides ways for me to serve and reach out and help, I'm all about that. So
Angela wants to know how you're going to allow your kids to be raised in the church, knowing that maybe in some ways the church harmed you or might be harmful to them, especially if one of them turns out to be LGBTQ or
that's my one caveat.
Masturbates or whatever, or likes to wear a bikini, whatever it is.
Yeah. Thank goodness Aaron and I are both on the same page with sexuality stuff.
Meaning what?
We both think that the shame rhetoric in the church is very harmful. And so we're both very comfortable with teaching a much healthier view of sexuality for our kids.
And then but some would say, well, if they're still going to church, they're going to get exposed to the shaming messages, even if you're teaching a counter message. And that some would even say, and I don't believe this, but some would even say that's confusing because they're getting one set of messages at home and then another set at church.
I think it teaches them about the real world. Like even a mixed faith marriage, I think is a great opportunity to teach kids that not everyone believes the same things, and that's okay. And you get to decide what you believe. And so for me, Aaron and I are not always going to be on the same page with all the different things, but I feel like we're enough on the same page that we can move forward. And we've even talked about this, like, how are we going to do family night, and are we going to use the scriptures? And I'm fine reading from the Book of Mormon. And if Aaron wants to talk about the historical part, I can talk about the application. What can we learn from this story? What value can we draw upon from this? And I think there's ways to make it work. And Aaron can take, the lead on some of the things I'm not comfortable with. And I'm totally for using whatever resource to teach values and good morals and ask hard questions. But what was I just going to say about Aaron and I?
I mean, as you're thinking about
LGBTQ.
Yeah.
That I'm undecided on that. I don't know if my child came out as trans or gay, I would have a very hard time allowing them go to church, like letting them be raised in the church. I don't know. That's a tough one for me. And I haven't spoken about that with Aaron, so I can't say what our decision would be, but I would be very, very apprehensive to allow my child to be exposed to messages that when they're that vulnerable and forming, their sense of self to have any sort of message that they're not perfect.
A lot of doubting Mormons worry that their kids will become believers and then look down on them or you as like faithful or as a project. It's like, oh, mom's the doubting one. Mom doesn't believe. So either disrespecting you or trying to fix you or save you.
Yeah.
Do you worry about that they will look down on you?
Yeah. In my mind, that's worst case scenario. Like the idea of, for example, being excluded from my child's wedding. When you're getting married, you don't think about your parents' feelings, but becoming a mom and seeing like how much parents do for their kids and how much they sacrifice, like, how dare you get married somewhere that I can't be? So that would be really hard. Gratefully, the church, again, like, I'm growing up in the best time to be in the position I am, because the church has evolved and changed a lot of the really harmful, hurtful policies for people like me. So I would hope that my child would choose to have a ceremony outside the temple. But I feel like growing up in a very nuanced home, I would be surprised if my child somehow developed this black and white orthodoxy. So again, that's the worst case scenario, and that'd be really hard for me. But I see that as being unlikely.
If you're loving, if you're tolerant and accepting, if you model respect across the faith divide, if you model unconditional love, it's going to be hard for your kids not to pick that up
and
want you at their wedding and love you no matter what, and see that the family's going to be great no matter what, and that your soul will be in good hands no matter what, right?
And Aaron and I both are very on the same page about the church does not have a monopoly on truth, and there's a lot of valid paths in this life, and just logistically, with the amount of children in the world or humans in the world and how many are in the church, I think it's easy to realize the flawed thinking if you really think that this whole life is about staying true to your covenants and the covenant path. It's just, there's got to be more than it. So I would be surprised if our kids somehow developed some sort of black and white, the church is the only valid path, when having both parents be on the same page. Even my parents are nuanced in that sense, that they don't think the church has a monopoly on truth. And my dad kind of has the feeling of bloom where you're planted. He blooms in the church because that's where he was planted. But, other people might do well, just as well, furthering God's work in some other religion or path.
Yeah. So my friend Stephen is asking, and this is kind of ending where we began a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I want to also leave space for you to make any final closing remarks that you want. But Stephen joined us late, and he wants to know why you decided to come on Mormon Stories today. And now you've done 4 hours and 50 minutes of an interview. And it's time for lunch. Maybe go to the bathroom again. But why come on Mormon Stories? Why not just go through your own faith journey, but keep it to yourself? The believers will say, why do you want to be on an anti-Mormon platform? Others will say, why do you need to sow the seeds of doubt? Why can't you just have your own journey, but then not have to tell the world and proclaim it on the rooftops? Just keep it to yourself. I know you've already addressed this at the beginning, but since some people join midway or don't hear the earlier episodes, and now that you've actually almost done it, why was it important to you to tell your story, and why tell your story on Mormon Stories?
I felt so alone in my journey, felt so misunderstood. So although the main audience here is not believing members, I know there are many. Yeah.
Bishops, stake presidents, they all listen.
And, I asked you to tag me on my Facebook page. Being authentic is one of my top values. I value it in other people, and I've always desired to have that value myself. And I feel like growing up in a Mormon context, I suppressed that value a lot as a missionary, as a mother at church, a wife. You want to put your best foot forward and make everyone think everything's good and fine and perfect and wonderful. So for me, this is living in accordance with one of my values, which is authenticity. And although I'm an active member of the church, I don't want to pretend to be something I'm not, and to pretend to have the same beliefs as everyone that I sit in the pews with, because, I don't want people to be upset or hurt when they find out that I'm, maybe acting a certain way. And when I speak about my beliefs, it means different than what they believe, because there's kind of this just assumption everyone's talking about the same thing. And usually when I'm speaking, I mean something very different than what some people assume I mean. So for me, again, it's about being authentic. It's about hoping to have greater understanding from believing loved ones of why I am where I'm at, and hoping that, there's less judgment and more empathy, that this has not been an easy road. It's been painful. It's been heartbreaking. It's been devastating in so many ways. And I hope, if nothing else, people can hold space for that, and the fact that, I've done my very best throughout this whole thing. And then for those who are going through a faith crisis right now, I'm starting just barely to get out on the other side of it. And so it was really, really necessary for me to hear stories of hope and stories validating my conclusions, validating my feelings. And I needed that. And so, I appreciate the people that had the courage to share their story when I needed it. So I hope, I'd have that same courage to be willing to share. And what was the last part?
Why Mormon Stories?
Oh, Why Mormon Stories? Thank you.
I mean, you know how to use YouTube. You could just put this on YouTube. Right?
And my dad actually proposed that to me. I'll hire a videographer and you can make your own YouTube channel. Clearly, John has developed quite the platform for people to be able to share their stories with a wide audience. And so I'm not going to get the same reach that I would on my own YouTube channel.
Unless it's that YouTube channel you post your Christmas.
That might be a little unsettling for people to go from these happy Christmas dance to
Justin Bieber Christmas dance, family dancing
to my Mormon story. But also I really, really feel at home with this community. Watching the excommunications that you've highlighted has felt very personal to me, has felt in a lot of ways like my church was excommunicating me, someone who is a sincere seeker of truth, just trying to make sense of all of these facts that are really contradictory and really confusing and really hard to reconcile. I stand with this community and I respect what you do. And I mourn with the people who have lost their membership and who have spoken out and been punished for it. And so yeah, I believe in what you're doing and respect it a lot. So,
do you see Mormon Stories as anti-Mormon?
Not at all.
And if not, why not?
Unless anti-Mormon is the uncomfortable parts of church history that challenge faith, then no. To me, growing up, anti-Mormon were lies and people trying to tear down the church and had a vendetta and an axe to grind and possessed by Satan. So no, this is not anti-Mormon. If your definition of an anti-Mormon is anything that might possibly cause you to have doubts or question the common narrative, then I guess you could call it anti-Mormon, but that's not my definition. And I think most people wouldn't consider that the definition of anti-Mormon.
And we celebrate belief. We celebrate church activity. We support different paths. We have believers on. We have people in the middle. We have non-believers. We try and support mixed faith marriages and Orthodox people. We really want to support everyone. We just want people to be as informed and as healthy as possible, and then make whatever decisions work for them. Sorry, that just had to make that plug. Okay, so you've been amazing. I'll sum up our listeners. Emily Winkle writes, Kalin, you are amazing. Riley says, hi, everyone. I'd just like to introduce myself as the founder of the Kalin Organ fan club. If you'd like to join, let me know. All are welcome.
What's the last name on that one?
Riley Haney.
Oh, that's my brother's boyfriend.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So he's biased?
Yes, he's amazing. I love him.
Hi, Riley. Thanks for joining us. You've got a fan club now. How does that feel? So how do you want to close? What did we not cover that you want to make sure you end with? And then what do you want to say? You know, some people are going to say wickedness never was happiness. You can't be happier now. You can't be healthier now. I mean, I think you're alive, and that's saying something. But, you know, if you want to say anything to that as well, just to give people hope about joy and happiness on the other end, that's always welcome.
Yeah. Again, I was so touched by Wayne's sermon's words at the Thrive Day about the goodness being within you. And I've come to really believe that. And I think there's even room within Mormon theology for that perspective, the light of Christ, your conscience, whatever you want to call it, that regardless of your beliefs, there's some deeper meaning that connects us all, and that drives our desire for goodness and to help and empathize and relieve the suffering of other people. And so I just had so much fear about losing my faith of who I would become, and I'm okay with who Kalin is today. And that could change and probably will change and evolve some more. But I'm finally okay with myself. I'm finally okay with listening to my heart and listening to what's inside of me rather than all of the voices externally. And if nothing else, my faith crisis gave me that and gave me back that authority, and I'll be forever grateful for that. So hold on. Don't give up. Don't give in to the thoughts you might have that, you know, it doesn't get better or there's no way out. You know, I'm a testament that there is and that it does get better. And I'm grateful I'm alive and I'm here. And I'm grateful for my husband for staying by me through it all, and for his willingness to bend and flex for our well-being and happiness in marriage. And
your parents for
absolutely.
The unconditional love, right? Shout out to your parents and
yeah,
Aaron.
They're incredible too.
Your supportive siblings.
Yep.
Gay and straight.
I do have quite the fan club in that sense. We're all each other's fan club. We're a really close-knit bunch. But, you know, I just hope that people know that I truly do respect the entire spectrum of belief. And if you can validate my journey, even if you can't, you know, I do believe that every path without Mormonism is valid. And again, that's another one of those things that my faith crisis gave me that I'm so grateful for, that I no longer have to view people as a person I need to save or help, but that I can just embrace them and their path and their journey and support them on their, you know, their life path, whatever that is for them. And I don't have to try to, you know, mold them into what I think God wants them to be. So there are a lot of positives to this. It's hard to feel it in the moment, but there are a lot of beautiful truths and perspectives that you get after going through this that I never would have had before.
And knowing that for so long you were beating yourself up over sexuality, beating yourself up over faith and doubt and questions and all that stuff, how's it been to let all that baggage go?
It's been incredible. Like, for the first time, like, all those feelings of God hating me, of not being worthy, just like I look back and I just feel love. I feel like that was never God all along. That was never God telling me those things. And if there's a God, and I hope there's a God, I hope there's something bigger than this life, you know. I think he's proud of the person I am right now. And that's, you know, that's a big deal. And nobody has to tell me that. I just, you know, I feel it, and that feels good.
That's got to be the final word right there. So is it Kalin?
Yeah.
Kalin, thank you so much for joining us today. You every bit fulfilled my my hype that you were wise and thoughtful and compassionate, and so many people are raving about your maturity. You'll have to come back and read the comments and all the people
I will.
thanking you, and this is going to save lives. This is going to help people. This may even save marriages. And thanks to you, thanks to Aaron, thanks to your parents and everyone who in one way or another supported you on this. And thanks for sharing your beauty and your wisdom with us.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me. And
listeners, thanks for joining us, and support us if you can. If you want to keep Mormon Stories alive, about 1% of our listeners actually donate, and we could really use your support. So go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly subscriber, and we'll keep doing this for as long as we get the support. So thanks to those who support us. Please support us if you don't. Please spread the word. Please give us a positive review on Facebook, Mormon Stories Podcast page. We've had some haters leave some really awful reviews. They got mad that Trump got mentioned in a previous episode. And it's bringing our ratings down. So please give us a positive review on Facebook. Please give us a positive review on iTunes. Those things make a difference. If you can't donate, at least give us positive reviews. Like us on Facebook. Share this with others. Spread the word. And most importantly, just please live healthy, happy, thriving lives. Find what works for you. You're not stuck. You're not alone. You're not crazy. Find a community, find support, get the help you need, find a therapist, a coach. I know that you guys, you and Aaron have had a therapist, is that right? And that's been helpful for you?
Phenomenal therapist.
Yeah.
One specifically trained to work with faith crisis.
Do you want to say who that is, or do you not?
Sure. My therapist is Jeff Lundgren.
Oh, okay.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he tuned in a bit. He's in Sandy, right?
Yeah.
Shout out to Jeff. He's great. Natasha Helfer Parker's great. Find someone to help you and make a difference. Was the Mormon Stories retreat helpful?
Absolutely. Super helpful. Aaron and I both loved it.
Yeah?
And we were really impressed with the tone and the environment and how we were able to feel safe, both of us, to share and enjoy that. So it was really cool.
We may do some of those in the future, so stay tuned for that if you want to join. But thanks again, Kalin. You're awesome.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work, and we'll hope to bring you back. Someone asked already they want you to come back in a year and see how things are in a year. They're probably wondering if you could stay active.
Yeah, we'll see.
If you could survive.
Yeah, I don't know. Could change at any time.
All right. Thanks again. All right, everyone. And also a huge thanks and shout out to Angela for producing today's episode. Thanks, Angela. You're great. It's her first one. And we'll see you guys soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Thanks for joining us, those of you on Facebook as well. Take care, everybody.